Hello, and welcome to the Global Discussion, a discussion with creatives, leaders, and thinkers. My name is Simon Hodgkins. Today, it's great to be joined by Jim Carlough. Jim, you're very welcome to the show today. Let me begin by asking you maybe to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about the world of Jim Carlough and what you're up to. So over to you, Jim.
Yeah, Simon, thank you, and I'm glad to be here, and it's a pleasure to meet your audience for sure. Um, so I have been based in the U.S., but I've been in the healthcare kind of industry for my entire professional career, and I began my career working on the health insurance company side, and then transitioned in the late '90s to the technology side of healthcare. All of which has been in management and leadership in one variation or the other. About 25 years ago, while working for a tech company, I started mentoring people on the side, and I wasn't I didn't at the time charge for that service or assistance, but I found that people were often individual contributors, and they did such a good job that somebody came to them and, hey, Simon, I'm going to make you a manager, and they thrust you into this manager role, and they don't give you a roadmap. They just basically say, get the job done. You did a great job as an employee. Now be a manager. And I noticed a trend of things that I was repeating over and over and over again with people about how they could improve and what they could do differently. And about 2 years ago, I started thinking about retirement, and then realized I don't want to retire. I may want to get out of the corporate world and not work 60 hours a week, but I want to have fun. And I actually have fun teaching people how to be a better leader. And so I started saying that if I'm going to help people, I probably need to have a book to give some credibility to what I'm doing. So I sat down and I said, okay, let's create a book that gives people a roadmap of the things that will make a difference in their life as well as in the way they manage. And I started making a list of those characteristics. And the list was about 18 items long. And I said, oh boy, we're not going to be able to implement and teach people how to implement 18 characteristics. You'll lose them. They'll close the book and put it on the shelf. So I really structured, what I did is really rationalize them as far as I could and combine them to come up with a core 6 principles. And those principles became the foundation for what's in the book, which is called The 6 Pillars of Effective Leadership, a Roadmap to Success. So the operating plan is to obviously take this and create a coaching business, but also a speaking business, which I'm doing all of those things at the same time as the book is growing in popularity. Hopefully that helps explain who I am and where I come from.
Well, it does, Jim. Thanks very much for giving us a little bit of that context, and obviously to our audience around the world, it's very helpful. And look, you've obviously got what, 3 decades of leadership experience under your belt at this stage, if not more. And you've got a very accomplished career, and you mentioned in the sort of life sciences area of things, which is quite a complex area too. And obviously, you moved into the technology side of that, but let's dive into it a little bit more about leadership then, Jim, because obviously you've created these pillars. Could you maybe expand on them a little bit more? Because the book, 6 Pillars of Effective Leadership, it's really, I suppose, if I could use a term like a roadmap, it sort of helps people find the success that they're after. So could you maybe expand a little bit more about the sort of concept behind those 6 pillars and, how you went about sort of positioning the book?
So in terms of positioning, in terms of the 6 pillars themselves, it really almost created itself and came naturally as I started to refine and work things. And I really rationalized the first thing I did is what is the most important thing that a leader has to have today, which may be different than when I entered the workforce in 1983. So yes, more than 3 decades. Um, in 1983, in my first manager role, leadership was very authoritarian, almost militaristic, where the leader would say, okay, Simon, today I need you to do these 3 things. And then Simon would go do those 3 things. That's really evolved. And that's not how we manage today. And that's not how to produce high performing teams. That's what you do in a factory. when you're dealing with widgets or pencils or something and trying to assemble so many a day. But when you're dealing with people and you're dealing with complex things such as healthcare or whatever, you really need to have a foundational, how do I deal with people? Some people call it the soft skills, but I think those soft skills are the most important. So my number one principle in leadership is integrity. And I think we've gotten away from integrity, not just in the United States, but in some places around the world. And I think it's time we go back to that. And so my view is if you can't have integrity, you can't build a trusting team. You can't have people be supportive of your vision and direction. And if you ever try to show them compassion or empathy, they won't believe it. And they'll think you're just going through the motions. And I truly believe as a leader, you have to know your direct reports. You need to know and to be able to recognize when Simon's a little off and something may be bothering him, and when I need to react to that to see what I can do to help Simon. It may not even be work related, but it's important to understand those differences so you can deal with them. And so as I framed all of this out, it really all came together. And the six pillars, we touched at a high level integrity. We can talk more about that. But there's compassion and empathy, two different pillars, two different types of helping people, still helping them, but two different ways of doing it. Stability and focus, which I think a lot of people have gotten away from as well. I think this hectic pace that we're all under has caused people to lose a little bit of focus. You know, when I think of focus, I think of Jeff Bezos from Amazon. In the mid 90s, he started a book company online selling books, but he had this vision that I could bring the storefronts to the people. And he never wavered from that, even in those early lean years. And look what he's accomplished. You have to give him credit for his unwavering focus on getting that job done. And stability is sort of similar to that, but also different. And then the last pillar is humor. And the question I get all the time is, why humor? Humor is a very valuable tool if used correctly. When I talk about humor, I don't talk about going to the water cooler and cracking jokes that you heard on the radio on the way to work. You're not a stand-up comedian, and I don't profess to be one and don't want to be one. But really to use humor in order to diffuse a situation or to get people focused at a meeting or to refocus people when things go awry, or just to show the human side of who I am. A lot of times it's self-deprecating because I still do a lot of stupid things periodically. And I'll remind people I'm human, right? And I don't have all the answers, but we're going to work through this together. And it's been very, very successful.
Well, thanks, Jim. Thanks for sharing those sort of pillars. And it's important as well. I mean, you talk about integrity. It's sort of almost a foundational quality, isn't it? That's really required to build, as you're saying, that trust. But I also like what you're talking about in terms of that focus, the Jeff Bezos example. But focus today in today's world, we seem to have information bombarded us constantly. We're sort of task hopping instead of focusing. We've got AI and all the news coming in and the politics and everything. It's quite difficult to focus today, isn't it? Is there anything around that when it comes to leadership? Because without that focus, you're kind of in trouble as a leader, aren't you?
You are, and I'll give you an example. If have you ever been on a Zoom call with somebody who's a techie who has six monitors, and all you're doing is watching them go like this? And you can count how many times the head stops. I mean, I can tell you're laughing because you vision somebody doing that. That's not focus. If I see somebody on a call doing that, I'm going to send them a message and say, what's interesting on screen number 4? Or what's interesting on screen number 2? Because you can't be paying attention to the topic at hand if you've got all of this distraction. And you're right, it's a lot of distraction. I have one screen. There are days where I will turn on a second screen but never more than that. And the only reason I would turn on a second screen is only so I could see things bigger side by side. The only reason. Other than that, it does become a distraction because something's going to blip on the other screen. It's going to cause you to want to go look. And it could be a news break, it could be whatever. But the work that we do, and I don't mean any disrespect to any surgeons out there, but I always tell people what we do is not open heart surgery. Nobody's going to die if we take our time to get through this. And all of those distractions just cause you to rush through things and maybe not make the best decisions. So keeping that focus is so critical today more than ever, especially with all of the bombardment of stuff that's coming at us.
Yeah, and I really like that, Jim. And I also like what you're talking about as not just compassion, but empathy. We hear a lot about empathetic leaders today, but that compassion side of things too. And also what you said about humor, because you're right, it's not the stand-up comedian at the water cooler, but being able to, show that human side a little bit, that sort of genuine side, that's kind of really important as a leadership trait too, isn't it?
It's very important. If people see you as unapproachable, I'll give you an example. When I used to have to go to an office and not when we were started to work from home stuff, I would talk to people when I got out of the car, walking into the building, getting into the elevator, going up to where my office is, regardless of whether I knew them or not. If I could brighten somebody's day or interact them, it showed that even though I'm a leader, I'm approachable and I'm human. I do know of a CEO that at one time would park his car on the side of a building and enter a private entrance and take the freight elevator to their office solely so they wouldn't have to interact with people. And to me, that's not a leader. A leader needs to be with their people and needs to be able to what I call show up and actively listen and interact. And there's sometimes that we miss that or miss the point. I understand if you're, hey, I'm 5 minutes late for a meeting, I got to get there. Today I got to take the freight elevator because I got to get there fast. I get that, but not on an everyday occurrence. That you really need to be with the people, and so that you can interact with them and help them. Because if you're not with the people and actively listening, you won't know when you need to apply compassion or empathy, or if there's something crisis going on in their life that you need to give them time to resolve that.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. The two things I want to touch on, Jim, because I know you have quite extensive thoughts on both. And one of them is about we can't talk about leadership without talking about mentors, mentees. And I know you've got some real good thoughts on that, and I want to explore that with you. And the other thing, and I don't mind which order you want to tackle them on, but your thoughts on lifelong learning. So, can we maybe get a little bit of insight in terms of your thoughts on mentorship and this ongoing sort of requirement to keep learning?
So I'll take them in reverse order. Um, I think it's very important for people who want to be in leadership to understand that it's not an 8 to 4 job. It's a 24/7 job. And when you sign up to be a leader, you have to understand that leadership, excuse me, doesn't start when you get to your desk in the morning. Leadership starts when your feet hit the floor, getting out of bed in the morning. And it doesn't go away until you go to sleep at night, because you always have to be prepared to react or respond or engage. So to me, people need to understand in leadership that not only is it for the moment, but it's also for the future. And the world evolves, and so does leadership. As I mentioned earlier, in 1983, everything, managers were more authoritarian than they are today. I once told someone that I really feel bad for the people I managed in 1983, and I probably need to call them all and apologize. Because if I look at where I am today and how I lead, it is nothing like it was in 1983. I didn't know what compassion and empathy were. All I knew is I had to tell people to get stuff done. But getting stuff done in 1983 was done very differently than it is today. And so this journey is lifelong. You sign up for it, you're not getting off that train. And you instill it in others. And I instill these same principles in my children. And so these are not just principles that work in the business world, I have found. I have had a following in the last few months since the book came out with other audiences like superintendents of schools and highly educated people and a mother's group that I actually was on a podcast for, because a lot of these principles can just help you in normal life. So that's kind of the never ending journey of learning. And you always have to be learning and paying attention and evolving. But I also believe leaders need somebody to talk to, and that's a mentor. And I started mentoring people 25 years ago, and it actually has been very rewarding for me because I can learn more about people by interacting with them and offering them help. But I also have mentors. So when I run into a situation that I'm not familiar with, I have the ability to reach out to somebody or someone that can give me feedback as to how they might handle that situation. And when people ask me, well, isn't my boss my mentor? No, not typically. The mentor needs to be somebody that you trust and know. They can be from your same employer, but typically your manager might have different opinions than what somebody else might have. And it's good to get all that feedback.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Jim. And one question that springs to mind as you're talking through these different points is today's workplace, I suppose. You were talking earlier about, ringing people up that you were managing or leading in the past. Today's workplace, it's very different for a lot of people because you may not be going into the head office anymore or the branch office where everybody's there, they're all at the desk. We are now managing people across the world, different cultures, different languages, different time zones. What about leadership in this sort of remote work, hybrid work, new technology era? Because it's kind of changed leadership a little bit, has it, Jim?
It has, because we've had to do things that we might not be comfortable with, which is like managing remotely. And how do you keep in contact with people? And so, for example, if I'm managing and my principles haven't changed since we've gone to a remote workforce, I typically have a weekly departmental meeting, and then I have individual one-on-one meetings. The only thing different today is that all of those occur via Zoom, and there's still this interaction face to face. Now, for those people who have more hair than you or I, they have bad hair days, and I can respect that. So you don't have, if you're having a bad hair day, you don't need to be on camera. But for the most part, 95% of the time, we both need to be on camera. I mean, there are areas of the country, even in the US, where there's still technology issues. And like my internet connection is god awfully slow compared to what's available. But the reality is, you can't replace this human connection that happens when two people are visualizing each other, which is why I believe AI is never going to replace humans. The reality is that AI is not going to pick up the human emotion when I see concern in somebody's face, or if I see somebody smile, or if I see somebody looking disconcerting or even emotional.
So, Jim, another question I've got for you is about, going back to this demanding workplace that we all seem to be in today. And we hear about stress, we hear about burnout, and maybe some people that are in our teams around the world may be struggling a little bit with these kind of areas, particularly in this fast-paced environment. So, what about leaders? Because you also have to must have a care of duty. You have to look out for people, team members' well-being, and it seems to be a growing area. We seem to hear a lot about stress and burnout these days, don't we? In terms of the sort of workplace culture, unfortunately.
Yeah, and in the US, we also have, I believe, an issue where that translates into a mental health crisis as well. And I'll give you an example, not a mental health crisis example, but a couple years ago, I had a single mom working for me, and it was during the summertime. and it was very, very busy at work, very busy with lots of stuff going on. And I know her plate was overflowing. And it was early August, and I asked her how things were going because she just looked like she was worn out. And this was on a Wednesday morning. And when I asked her if there was something bothering her, she said, "Well, I just realized my son goes back to school in 2 weeks, and I've spent no time with him this summer." And I said, "You've got to be kidding." And I said, "That's my fault." And I owned up. I said, I am very, very sorry. I said, "So here's what we're going to do. You're going to log off from your computer, and you're going to take today and Thursday and Friday off, and you're not taking it as PTO time. This is time that I owe you for all that you've done the last 3 months, because this isn't your fault. This is mine." And she sat there for a moment and thought, and she said, um, "Can I negotiate and do this next week, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, so I have time to plan something?" And I said, "Yes, as long as you promise me you're not going to renegotiate next week. But I respect the fact that you want to complete some things in advance. But I think it's most important that you understand you need to spend time with your son. And I recognize what we've done to the workplace, and we're going to fix that."
Yeah, it's a great example, Jim. Thanks for sharing that. Look, we've covered an awful lot, from integrity and trust and empathy and all the different topics that we're involved in. There's a lot more that people can get into, obviously, with the book, and I'll come on to that in a moment. But one other thing I want to ask you is the next sort of 6 to 12 months, Jim. What's on your horizon? What's on your roadmap? What are you working on? What does it look like for you?
So on my horizon, I'm getting prepared to launch a coaching opportunity for people. I believe that I can additionally help people even remotely in leadership and with the 6 pillars. So I'm creating a coaching program, which will be an 8-week program, meeting once a week, to help mentor somebody for a period of time and help focus them and help them build a roadmap for themselves on how to become a better leader in their particular situation. So, how your situation and my situation with who we work for could be completely different, and we have to recognize that. And so I'm putting the framework together. So for those who are listening, if you care to follow me, we'll give you that website in a bit. But sign up for a newsletter, or just sign up and connect, or do whatever, and I'll make sure that you get notified when we launch that.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Jim. Exciting times ahead. And look, let's do it, because if people want to connect with you and they want to find out more about the coaching or indeed the book, Jim, where is the best place to send them to? Is it a website? Is it LinkedIn? Is it a bit of both?
So my website is probably the best place, and there's a link to purchase the book on the website. The other place is it is available on Amazon, and it is available on Barnes and Noble. It's also available on Roku, um, and there was one other site. But if they just log into my website, which is just www.jimcarlough, no spaces or anything in between the Jim and the Carlough.com, you'll be able to be connected with me that way and subscribe to a newsletter and to keep in touch with me. I am on LinkedIn. I am on Facebook. I am on Instagram. If you follow me on any of those, you'll see my leadership posts, which I try to do several times a week. And that's a good way to connect as well. But again, I welcome the connections with all of your audience.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, and I'd encourage people to go to Jim's website there and check it out. And also, if you're on one of the book sites like Amazon or whatever, there's actually quite a good preview there. You can actually get a sense of the book, and there's a lot of information in it. So I'd encourage people to do that. And of course, go and sign up for Jim's newsletter. Keep in touch about that coaching. Jim, finally, is there anything else you'd like to share with our worldwide audience today? Any sort of parting thoughts you'd like to leave us with before we wrap up today?
Yeah, the one question I get asked often is, where do I think the future's going for all of us? I have a lot of positive hope that through everything that's going on, we will evolve for the better, just as we have in decades past. And I know there's a lot of concern, especially with the whirlwind around politics and leaders around the world. But I think that that's going to settle down. We can't continue to be under the threat of attack or destruction or whatever. I have much better hope for humans. If not, the alternative is not very good. But I have high aspirations. I think we're going to see a much better decade that we're entering now. Well, we're midstream in 2025, but I think that over the next couple of years, we're going to see a lot of settling out of all of the what I call the noise.
Well, I welcome that, Jim. That's a great note to end on. So thanks so much indeed to everybody who's been watching or listening to this episode with Jim Carlough. I want to ask people to obviously like, follow, subscribe to everything I need you to do to help support the global discussion. Go and check out Jim Carlough's website. Go and subscribe to his newsletter, as I said, and definitely check out the book. It's definitely worth picking up and reading. And all that remains for me to do is to say thank you, Jim. It's been such a pleasure to catch up with you again today. And thanks for being a guest on the show.
Well, Simon, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. Hopefully, a lot of this resonates with your audience. Send us feedback, either on my website or on social media or on Simon's podcast website. We like feedback.
That's great, Jim. Thanks so much.
You have a good day, sir.